Okay, so singing on Shabbos Kodesh, our heilige Zemiros. So the singing on Shabbos has the opportunity and the power to transform us and transport us to a completely different place. We're going to be learning Be'ezus Hashem about our incredible Zemiros, what they mean, where they come from, and what they do for us. And it's an amazing thing, and today I want to give a little bit of a hakdama, because I think it's important to understand where the Zemiros come from, how powerful they are, before we actually start with the words of Zemiros. But al kaponim, we do have to understand that Zemiros takes us to a place of kedusha, a place of simcha, a place of enjoyment. Now the Zemiros that we sing were not just songs. The Zemiros that we sing come from the greatest tzaddikim, the greatest gedolim, and there's tremendous significance within all of the Zemiros that we sing. And as we're going to explain one by one some of the most famous Zemiros that we sing on every Shabbos, we're going to hopefully transform our singing Zemiros into just not something that we do every Shabbos, but something with a lot more meaning to it. Be'ezah Hashem. I want to tell the Olam a gewaldige Tosfos. Tosfos in Sanhedrin, Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, unbelievable Tosfos. Tosfos tells us, and he quotes a Medrash, where the Medrash says, to Modegazach, where the Medrash says that there are malachim that are known as chayos. These malachim known as chayos are not allowed to sing shira on Shabbos Kodesh. Only Klal Yisrael are allowed to sing shira, and Klal Yisrael, so to speak, says Tosfos, take the place of the malachim on such a holy day, which means that when we sing Zemiros on Shabbos, we're not just singing a song. We're not merely saying the words, but we're actually taking the place of the malachim, singing the praises of the Rabbeinu Shalom, which is an amazing, amazing thing. Now, another nekuda of Zemiros is the power that's been invested into the Zemiros, into the words, that was actually packed into the words, stems not only from the fact that we're singing the praises of Hashem, L'Koved Shabbos, as we'll see many of the Zemiros talk about Shabbos Kodesh specifically, not all of them, we'll talk about why, but al kaponim, it also because the greatness of the composer of the song of the Zemiros. In other words, the Zemiros was composed by a tzaddik who invested such tremendous, and they infused in the words the kedusha. Now we know Chazal tell us that when you say the words of a tzaddik, Chazal tell us what happens in the upper worlds, whatever that means. You cause his mouth, so to speak, to move, his lips to move, as steht in Chazal, which means that when we sing Zemiros, we're actually stirring the author's neshama, his soul, and therefore we have an access to the spiritual power that he put into the words of Zemiros, which is why very commonly the author of many Zemiros, as we'll explain, inserted their names into the Zemiros itself. We'll get there. Tell the Olam Amodika Pele Yoetz. The Pele Yoetz brings down a Maisa by Rabbi Yisrael Najara. Rabbi Yisrael Najara was famously, he was one of the Paitan, he was a poet in Svas, and he was known as the composer of Koriboin, which we'll talk about Be'ezah Hashem when we get to Koriboin. Rabbi Yisrael Najara, he was known for specifically composing Koriboin. Listen to the Maisa that the Heilige Pele Yoetz brings, and you understand from this the power of Zemiros. He says he once sat at the Shabbos table, and he was singing Zemiros with his beautiful voice, and the Malachim came down from Shemayim to hear his magnificent songs of praise. Now it was a very hot day, it was boiling hot, no air conditioning, Tzfas, Ira Kodesh, and he rolled up his sleeves. Now that was deemed to be a very disrespectful act for such a choshev yid, and therefore as a result of that the Malachim decided they're leaving. They can't be in such a place, and therefore they left. Rabbi Sai, the Arizal was standing outside the home of Rabbi Yisrael Najara, and he saw loads of Malachim leaving the home of the Rav. And he rushed inside and he said, Rebbe, What's going on over here? It looks like the Malachim left because of the way that you were dressed. So Yisrael quickly got dressed back to the proper way, resumed the singing, and the Malachim came down. Rabbi say, when we sing Zemiros, it's not stum songs. This is a time that we can get closer to Hashem, and it's a point that Chazal tell us that the Malachim come down to hear our very voices, our song, and our Zemiros. Now, what's the significance, you may ask, of singing on Shabbos? So I'm going to give you some Marmakomis in a moment. I want to show you some of the earliest sources for Zemiros. Where did it come from? Who wrote them down? Where's the first place we find Zemiros was sang on Shabbos? We'll get there in a second. But what's the significance of singing on Shabbos? Why is it so impactful that even the Malachim descend from Shamayim and join us at our Shabbos tables? For what? What's the purpose? So the Pasuk says, and you look this up in Shemos, Perek Yudalid, Pasuk Lamed Aleph, that after the miracle, after the nes of Kriyas Yamsuf, after the splitting of the sea, the Torah says, Vayaminu ba'Hashem, and then Oz Yoshe. That means, Vayaminu ba'Hashem means they became people of such emunah. They rose to the heights of people that were literally completely dependent on the Rabbeinu Shalom, and that's when that brought them to sing a song, Oz Yoshe, which means that when we reinforce our emunah, we are moved, hopefully, and inspired to talk about the Rabbeinu Shalom and sing to Hashem. That's what they want to say, is the impact and the importance of singing Zemiros on Shabbos. Shabbos is a day of emunah in Hashem. That's what Shabbos is. Shabbos is a day of connecting with Hashem, spending time with Hashem, relying on Hashem. Our businesses are closed. It's a day of emunah in Hashem. That's what Shabbos is. We are reinforcing our emunah, and therefore, on the day of reinforcing our emunah, it makes sense that we sing Zemiros, because just like the Torah said, that that's what they did after Kriyas Yamsuf, after Ve'aminu b'Hashem came Oz Yoshe, so too Shabbos Kodesh brings us to the level, or should bring us, and can bring us to the level of tremendous emunah in Hashem's existence in the world, and how He governs the world with tremendous hashgacha pratis. We made it to express our, newfound love and connection with Hashem. We appreciate everything He does, and because of that, we start singing Zemiros. So, as I mentioned to you, where we find in Chazal this idea of Zemiros, I guess that one of the first places as a remez would be in the Tosfos and Sanhedrin that brings the Medrash, but the Oizarua, one of the Rishonim, already brings down in Shabbos Simon Membeis, that he brings down the free that Medrash that I mentioned to you before from the Tosfos in Sanhedrin. They were masakin specifically to add Zemiros in Pesukah de Zimra, for example, Nishmas, and many of the other things that we say in Pesukah de Zimra that we don't say during the week. Because of that reason, the Zohar Kodesh also brings down, and he writes that Ki Yom HaShabbos Hu Yom Simcha, and therefore, when we're in shul and we're standing in tefillah, we're singing to Hashem. So we find already in the Zohar Kodesh this idea that Shabbos Kodesh represents a time of more singing with the Rabbeinu Shalom, and the minig of saying Zemiros specifically at the shulchan, at the table, at the Shabbos meal. Where was that mentioned? Where do we find the earliest sources to these things? So we actually find it from the Rishonim and some of the Gedolei Achronim that we find already started to sing Zemiros. For example, one of the examples of the Sefer Rokeach. Sefer Rokeach, one of the Rishonim, Simon and Dalet, brings down the Seder of the Sudas Yom HaShabbos. And he writes that after dessert of the Sudas Shabbos, they would start singing Zemiros v'shvach b'Shabbos la'Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's brought down in the Elia Rabbah and Simon Reish Peites Sikot and Beis. Mishabur brings it in Sikot Nei over there as well. The Indian of singing specifically over there. In the Machzevitri, also in Simon Kuf Nun Ches, the minig of singing Zemiros by the Sudas Halayla. It's interesting, they used to do it either after the meal or at the end of the meal. Or Sudas Boike, he writes, Kodem Kinuach Suda, before dessert. It's interesting how the very first places that we find Zemiros ever brought down in the Gedolei Rishonim v'Achronim, they all seem to have done at the end of the meal. I'm not sure what the significance of that was. It's also Eidos from the Leket Yosha. The Leket Yosha was a Talmud of the Heilige Trumas Hadeshen, right? Many of the Minhagim of the Ramah are based on the Trumas Hadeshen. So the Leket Yosha brings in the Sefer Leket Yosha Omer 36 about his Rebbe, the Trumas Hadeshen, that he would sing Zemiros on Shabbos. And again, Rabbi said this is not stam. It's important to realize that our Rishonim were singing Zemiros at their Shabbos table. Now, we'll end with the chashivas of singing Zemiros, and in Hashem, next time we're going to go through the actual Zemiros. We'll pick one of them, and we'll start Be'ez Hashem. But Lemaisa, the Yisod V'Shosh V'Avoda brings down as follows, and I quote, V'yezai ha'odom lechabed es Hashem hoino migroinoi lezames miros v'shvachim ala shulchan. For those of you that think that the Yisod V'Shosh V'Avoda was Hasidish, he was not. Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, and he writes how careful a person has to be to Mechamed Hashem with his money, i.e., buy food, Lukovit Shabbos, Oinik Shabbos, whatever, but also Umigroina from his throat. Be Mechamed Shabbos and Hashem with your throat by singing Zemiros and Shvach on the table. The Heilige Eish Lavam the Buchacha in Siman Reish Pei Aleph, at the end of Sif Aleph, he brings down from the Zoya Kodesh, many places, that the Rabbeinu Shalom has nachas ruach when a person is ma'anig his guf on Shabbos. Al Kain, says the Ish Avram, how a person should be singing in shul and in the Suda Shabbos Zemiros to Hashem. It's another example. The Heilige Karlina in the Beis Aaron. In the Beis Aaron, the Heilige Karlina brings down, and I quote, Oma, Shehirhurei tshuva ha'olim na'odem b'suda Shabbos kuroivim b'yaisen al kudas ha'emes. Hear this? So the Heilige Karlina, that the hirhurei tshuva that a person has during the Suda Shabbos are very close to emes, or kemat, shegoivim yaisen hirhurei tshuva sha'olim ha'odem b'isat tefillah, they're even greater and higher than the hirhurei tshuva that a person can have during davening. Va'omer shehazemiros shel Shabbos kodesh heima b'chinas kenafayim l'Suda Shabbos. What are the wings that bring up your Suda Shabbos straight to the Kisa HaKavod? So the Heilige Beis Aaron, it's the Zemiros. The Zemiros are the wings that bring everything up. Okay, Rabbi Sai, that was just my Hagdama into the Sugya. There is a tremendous amount to do. We've got weeks and weeks to go. I just wanted the Olam to understand the Chashivas of what Zemiros is. And in Mitzvah Hashem, next time, we're going to start with just one tiny thing of how Zemiros came into our Zemiros book, so to speak, and then we'll go straight into Be'ez Hashem, the first one, B'siyata D'Shmaya. Shkoi for joining us.